Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Brass Pittsburgh from Roxley Games. Brass Pittsburgh is the third installment in this series, although third if you're counting the renewed version of this series, starting with Brass Lancashire, then Brass Birmingham, and now we have Brass Pittsburgh. This is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below, and additionally, AllPlay is a channel sponsor, more with them at the end of this video. With that said, in Brass Pittsburgh, the general notes of Brass are going to be preserved, with a lot of differences, some small, and some that really change up the way you have to mentally approach the game. This is always tricky to cover because I'm going to try to give you a general overview of what Brass does, general overview, high level, and then from there I'm going to go into the differences that Pittsburgh adds, and then give my general thoughts on Brass as a series, as well as my specific thoughts on the changes you see here in Pittsburgh. With that said, going into Brass. Brass as a general series of games, it takes place across two arcs. You're going to have the first arc of the game where players are going to be slowly building up their industries from their personal player board, as well as placing down various routes, canals in the original game. You're going to be placing them down in the canal era, placing things down onto the board, trying to create connections and build up a series of industries before moving into the second age, where a bunch of the things you built are going to go away. Some might stay, but a bunch of things are going to go away, and then you'll be rebuilding again on the board with new industries as you've moved up and further developed through your player board. The game comes down to the synergies of the various industries and how they all play off of each other. You're going to be needing to create coal and iron in order to make those available to yourself and to others. As you build buildings that make those available, players, including yourself, might consume those in order to go ahead and build the things they want to build, which will eventually lead to your buildings flipping, giving you more points and income and things like that. You're also going to be trying to sell things. You're going to want to create connections to various spots on the board, usually on the edge of the board, in order to conduct various sell actions, flipping a bunch of industries at once. You are playing with a hand of cards. You're going to have 8 cards in your hand until you eventually start, running out of cards in the deck. You're going to be going through that cycle, going through the full deck twice, again, once in each era, having location cards that allow you to build in specific locations, having industry cards that allow you to build specific industries in a variety of locations, and then also using those cards to power up the various other actions, such as selling, such as building routes on the board, such as taking loans in the game, which is going to give you a much needed influx of cash, but at the cost of a slow drain on your income each round as you play through the game. You're doing all of this while basically operating in a shared economic landscape. That's the whole crux of the game. Do I build these industries because I can rely on a powerful sell action, or are you going to get there first, getting more rewards than I do, and so my time is better spent powering up all the various coal and iron that are needed by the players as they expand across the board? Are you trying to get the majority of your points through small iterative industry flipping, through a giant sell action, or through the connections you're going to create by placing various tokens down, creating links between the areas as the various zones on the board become more powerful and more sought after due to the various link marks you're going to have on tiles, either some printed on the board or alternatively some as you flip those industries. So it really comes down to trying to create these synergies between the economic landscape that is being created by the players. You want to best figure out where you fit into this role, where you can most make money off the other players and the game system itself as you go through the 2 eras of the game. That is a high level overview of what Brass does as a concept. The individual actions I didn't really go into detail. I covered you can build things with a card, you can sell things, you can take a loan. There's a bunch you can develop. I didn't talk about developing. Developing is a way for players to look at their player board and then power up through the actions, because normally you're going to be going, and again, depending on which Brass you use to a different arc, but you're going to be working your way up over here on these player boards, taking various buildings from the board, and developing allows you to get access to larger buildings sooner rather than later, which sometimes is worth it and sometimes less so, depends on what your specific goals are in the game. That's high-level Brass. Brass Pittsburgh comes in as the 3rd iteration on the series. Again, there's the original Brass from Martin Wallace. There's also Age of Industry, a sister game, very similar arc to the game. Then Martin Wallace and Gavan Brown came in and redesigned Brass Birmingham, as well as Lancashire, or Brass Lancashire as well as Birmingham, I should say. And then several years later, we now finally have Brass Pittsburgh. Brass Pittsburgh adds a lot of small changes and then one very, very large change. Although I guess it depends on your own perception of the game what counts as small or large. To me, the largest change is oil. Oil is an entirely new construct in the game that's going to have, let's cover the small changes first. Let's come back to oil. First of all, the player board. Your player board is going to have some buildings that are very familiar, such as the coal over here, such as ironworks and all that. But you're going to have a lot of buildings that are very different. Different things that you're selling. You're going to have skyscrapers. These are incredibly powerful buildings that give you a lot of points, a lot of links, and also give you a free sell action. Brass players know how powerful every single action is in this game. One of the challenges, the tensions of the game, is the idea that you can often do a lot of things at once if you build up for it. So it's a question of how much time do you want to spend building up to that perfect action. Taking a sell action where you can sell 3 or 4 things at once is better on your action economy than one of two things, and also can time nicely into when you take a loan and all of those actions. And so a skyscraper that gives you an extra action is incredibly powerful. In fact, all of the top buildings on this board are going to give you very strong various strategies you can pursue, from powering up your various heavy rails. We haven't talked a lot about these, but there's differences to the way the canals and rails work in the game, from working into the oil industry that we haven't talked about either. But the player board and the buildings on it are going to be different to a degree. Again, once you know the ins and outs, it's going on the same economic aspect of things, but there are going to be differences on your player board. The buildings, the buildings, the player board, all of that. The board layout. Obviously, the board is going to be very different. Speaking of which, there's a new design, a new manufacturing approach to this board that rejects glare. You can't necessarily see this as well, but in person, normally it's a lot of trying to move yourself to make sure you don't get that glare from the lights. This doesn't have that at all. This board completely rejects any glare. There is no glare on it from any angle on the board, which is a nice little quality of life upgrade. Separate from that, this is the obvious map, and there's also a two-player board. There's a specific two-player board for those of you who want to dabble in Brass at 2 players. Yes, I will give you my thoughts on that as well, because I have played Brass at 2 players several times now, and well, we'll give you my thoughts on it later. But there's a two-player board if you want to dive into that. The way the links work on the board. In the original Brass, there's the canal era and the rail era. Instead, in this Brass, you have light rails and heavy rails. Light rails will go away in the first round, so anything you build in the first round, they're going to go away. Heavy rails don't go away, but they are a lot more expensive, so do you want to go ahead and invest in that? Is that the right use of your time and resources in the early part of the game? But they will stick around. Or you can go ahead and continue to build light rails again in the second half of the game, and they won't go away this time. So there's an interesting element there. Instead of canals and rails, you have light rails and heavy rails, as well as specialized rails. You'll be unlocking very specialized trains from your player board, as well as starting with very specialized trains. So you're going to try to choose not just the difference between light and heavy and the cost those impose, but also which of your specialized rails will help you out in the game. And instead of canals, you have oil lines. You're going to have oil in the game. That's one of the big changes in my opinion, which is the oil is going to be these various oil centers, and you're trying to connect them to the networks. Again, experienced Brass players will know how important the idea of a network is. A network is the access you have to all things, both through your own routes as well as other players, and getting oil into a network is such a key part of the game, because you need oil for a lot of your sell actions, or in some cases to build buildings in general. And so getting access to oil is key. You're going to have these various buildings, which as you get access, you're going to flip them. You'll have some degree of oil in the first round, some degree of oil coming into the second round, and you suddenly created access to oil that as it flows through your pipes will give you various bonuses. Do you want extra income? Do you want extra points? What is it you want as you and others benefit from the oil that you're placing onto the board? And the fact that you can get access to oil from different routes on the board means you don't really have that monopoly on oil unless you chain off both sides of an oil production, which could be a strategy in its own right, especially if you power up into your high level flowing, getting a lot of points through one of your stronger tiles. That'll give you a chunk of points as you flow oil through it. So oil and the need for oil as a primary resource is a huge part of the game. There's also coke, which kind of plays in as a new resource as well, that when you sell it back to the market is going to give you points, which means as you utilize coke for various things, versus as you pay it back to the market, that's going to be a big change too. Speaking of which, the way markets work in the game is also a big change. Instead of having a dynamic market that's more just kind of in general play, you have localized markets instead. You have different points on the board where players can create access to specific localized market within the regions, which will slowly deplete resources, and then again, as we've played Brass before, as you supply new resources, you can automatically refill it. So as players use up the coal in this market, and someone builds a coal mine, that will immediately consume those oil, paying them back the resources, giving you a nice return on the cash you just spent, and allowing you to work your way up the income track. Or alternatively, if it's coke, you'll also get the benefit of points as you do so. So having the localized markets in the game, combined with the lack of a more dynamic economy to those markets, totally changes up the way players will approach those markets in the game. Those are most of the changes. There might be a few others as far as things that I'm not immediately registering, but those are the main changes in the game that you'll experience. Different ways that will affect the way you interact with Brass, the biggest of which, in my opinion, are going to be those localized markets and the introduction of oil as an entirely new economic aspect to the game that you have to be mindful of. There's a lot of other small things, like just one example I didn't even mention, is the idea that you can earn alcohol in the game that can be used to discard, to pay for, to combine with another card to play a card regardless of the region on that card. Brass always had different ways you can kind of bypass the restriction. What happens if you're down to a few cards in hand and you really need to specifically play into Cleveland? There always were ways around that. Alcohol is one of the new ways around that in Brass Pittsburgh. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into my general thoughts and opinions on Brass, as well as my thoughts and opinion on Pittsburgh. Brass is a 5 out of 5 game for me. It has bounced around over the years. At times it's been 4.5, at times it's been a 5. But right now, I checked my rating scale, checked my top 100 from last year. It currently is a 5 out of 5 as of the last time I've played it, enjoyed it. It is such a tight economic engine. I believe, is Brass Birmingham still the #1 game on Board Game Geek at the moment of this filming? I don't know, but I think it might be. It is a well-loved, well-respected game, with Birmingham, the second iteration of it, being the current favorite version of it, from, I guess, 2 versions, because this third one hasn't really had a chance to get a lot of critical reception yet. I love Brass. I find the synergies and the way the economic landscape is created between the players is such a tight engine. It's a game where it's not about what am I going to do, it's about where do I fit within the needs of society, society being the other 2 or 3 players around the table. But that really changes the way you interact with it. You can't just go in with your core strategy, you have to react to what the other players are doing, because to min-max your points in this game, it really is about figuring out the needs of the board state and being able to fulfill those needs as well as possible. Combined with a fairly simple rule set. Brass is a relatively simple game. There's a lot of nuances to the things you can and can't do, but if you can think of all the various 30-page rulebooks out there, the original Brass rulebook, Brass Birmingham, Brass Lancashire, they're 6-7 pages. Sorry, there's 8 pages, 8-page rulebooks. They're not super complex as far as the actual rules you have to pick up in order to dive into the engine. And they give you a ton of strategy for those. There's a reason it's a 5 out of 5 game for me. There's a reason it's a #1 game of all time in Board Game Geek. It is a well-loved, well-respected engine, with Birmingham being the best version of that engine. Brass Pittsburgh, specifically, doesn't change my thoughts on Brass overall. It is a good variation on Brass. It's an incredible variation on Brass with a lot of nuances to it. And I will talk more about reasons to own different versions of Brass at the final part of this video. But for right now, as far as the changes go, none of them are bad. They're all just different. I don't think it takes away from my experience of Brass, and it does add in some ways while taking away some of the simplicity. And it does trip me up as someone who's used to Brass. The amount of times in this game I have prepped myself for a sell action and then forgotten that I needed oil around that sell action. If you're used to Brass, you have to get used to the new ways that this Brass operates. But effectively, as far as the changes go, the player board in the new buildings, they allow you a bunch of strategies to the top level buildings on them. They're just fun. Again, many of them are very familiar, and the ones that are different allow you new ways to engage with the game. It doesn't make or break the core engine for me. It's the Brass player board, it's the Brass ecosystem, all of that works overall. As far as the board layout, sure, it's a different board. The 2-player board is nice, the board production, like that non-glare, the lack of a glare on a board, that's incredible. The 2-player board, that's incredible. But regular Brass, yes, it is a different board that you have to slightly adapt to, but again, I don't know if it majorly, I'm not playing Brass on such a high level where I know the ins and outs of every location, the best way to connect, and now suddenly I have a new way to approach the game. It's a new board. It doesn't meaningfully change my experience. I'm doing the same things on the new board, again, outside of the 2-player board and how that operates. The difference between the light rails and heavy rails, it's a small, meaningful difference. It gives you a new way to invest. Brass always had ways to invest in the second era, in the first era, and you have to choose how important that was to you. This, again, does that. It's nice. It's a nice quality of life aspect to it. Nice, not really quality of life. It's a nice extra level of strategic choice that you have. For the most part of my games, I have done mostly light rails in the first era, with the dabbling of one occasional heavy rail just to get things set up when I had the right moment at the right time, and again, the right needs of the board. For the most part, it's a nice little aspect to it. As far as the local markets and the oil, which to me, like I said already, are the biggest changes I've experienced, I like the oil aspect. It's another little lever that you can push when you're trying to figure out not just your needs, but the needs of other players, and to set yourself up for that. Again, that's the whole crux of Brass, figuring out where you fit into the system and taking advantage of it, whether it's setting up your own needs or setting up the needs of others and benefiting from that. And I like those changes. I like the things they do. I like the oil as far as how it adds, the various extra bonuses, the little rail bonuses you get as far as connecting things. I like that oil as a resource and what it does. I also like the local markets, although I will say I miss the dynamicness of the original market, trying to figure out when to sell my resources back to a market. That had a nice element to it. This one it's not better or worse, it's different. You have local markets, they're more fixed, taking a construct action in order to immediately flood a local market and then making yourself available for yours or other actions. All that tension is there, it's just a different fine-tuning of it. And so overall, my opinion of Brass Birmingham and Brass Pittsburgh, we'll do, again, comparisons at the very end. It's a great game. It's a great game. It gives you enough differences. Well, we'll talk about enough differences. I keep saying this. We'll talk about the differences part later. I like this. I like this a lot. It's been a lot of fun. I have had a chance to play it several times at 2-player, and I think it is a tense game. I still think it is better at 3 and 4 players. For me, Brass has always been a game that I personally think shines at 3. I think it's rated as best with 4, if I'm not mistaken. For me personally, I like that slightly less downtime and the ability to get in a bit more and get your hands into more pots. But 2 players is a little bit more back and forth. Again, the 2-player map is good. I've played it multiple times at 2 players, and I've enjoyed all my plays of it at 2 players. I still think 3 and 4 is where the game is going to shine overall. It's great. It doesn't change my opinion for the worse or for the better. If you are excited about Brass and you wanted more versions of it, this is another version of it. For me, it's going to be a 5 out of 5 as another iteration of a game system that I already love. The last thing I want to cover is, do you need this game? Where does this game fit within your collection, within my collection? It's another iteration of a game you already love. Well, let me rephrase that. If you haven't picked up Brass until now, this is a great opportunity to do so. It's a new Brass. It's fresh. People are going to be excited about playing it. You're a game group that always wants to play the new shiny thing. This is going to be the new shiny thing. So if you are new to the world of Brass, this is great. I don't think it's significantly harder to dive into it than regular Brass. Maybe the extra level of oil for a new player might be a bit much. It's hard for me to really get myself into that head state because I'm not a new player. I've played the original Brass. I've played Lancashire. I've played Birmingham, and now I've played Pittsburgh. So I've gotten my hands into all the versions of Brass. I am not new to the system. If you are someone who has a lot of Brass already, do you need this? I think it is more different from the Brass ecosystem than Lancashire was to Birmingham. Meaning for context, my own collection, I have Brass Birmingham. I got rid of Lancashire when I realized that I play Brass 2 or 3 times a year, and I didn't need multiple versions of Brass. I'd rather have the one that is more familiar, the one that's more locked in my head, as opposed to having multiple maps for a game that I didn't play that often. Brass Pittsburgh, I feel, is more different. It still is going to feel very similar. If you are familiar with Brass, you can dive into this with the core rule set pretty locked in. Again, with the hiccup that you might find yourself on a sell action that you can't actually afford because you forgot about the need for oil. But outside of things like that, it is very familiar to Brass players. It's built on the same ecosystem, but it's not just a new map. It's new maps and new mechanics and new ways to approach things that I think if you are someone who plays Brass once a year, you probably still don't need 2 of them. This is more different. Again, I said to be clear on that, I think it's more different and it stands out more than the original 2 were different from each other, but I still don't think it's a game that you need if you're playing Brass very, very infrequently and if you're happy with your copy of Brass Birmingham. If you are a hardcore Brass fan, I think this is an easy recommendation. It's more Brass, and it's great at what it's doing. If you're new to Brass, I think it's a good recommendation. And if you find yourself in the middle, someone like myself who plays it 2, 3, maybe 4 times a year, I haven't yet decided for myself. I want it, to be sure. And which one would I choose, this or Birmingham? That's a hard choice as well. I'd need more plays of both to really lock in that decision, because again, it is more different. I had clear reasons why I kept Birmingham over Lancashire, but there were still elements of Lancashire that I missed. And if I got rid of either this or Birmingham, there would be elements of either that I miss. So if you follow yourself in that category, I'm not quite as clear on the advice I can give you there. In any case, as far as other game recommendations, my favorite game to recommend if you like Brass is Anno 1800. I find that it's a lighter version, a little less mentally draining, while feeling very thematically similar and mechanically adjacent, while also being designed by Martin Wallace. And if you want another heavy game that is going to be very rules light but strategy heavy and is also about finding out where you fit into that economic landscape, I highly recommend checking out Food Chain Magnate, my favorite Splotter game. And then lastly, I mentioned this channel is sponsored by Allplay. If you go to allplay.com, you can find a variety of games from both Allplay as well as their partner publishers, and everything ships for $4 flat rate shipping if you are in the US. Check out Container from Allplay. If you're looking for another heavy game about the synergies between players and about the buying and selling at the right time, check out Container, which they recently brought back into print. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.